Hello and welcome to the Drought Severity Evaluation Tool video demonstration. In this video, we will be discussing case study 4, which focuses on the snowpack analysis. In DSET, we are able to look at a number of variables that help us determine snowpack in a particular area. In this case study, we are interested in looking at the mountainous ranges that are located on the Navajo Nation. We are interested in understanding snowpack on the Navajo Nation due to the influence that snowpack has on forecasting water activity that comes as a result of melting snow waters in the summer seasons. In this case study, we will be looking at two forms of data sets. The first that we will be looking at is the Sentinel-2, the top of atmosphere, and also SNODAS. The variables that we will be working with in this case study are the Normalized Difference Snow Index, as well as the snow water equivalent. These two variables will provide us with an analysis of understanding snowpack trends on the Navajo Nation with these forms of snow measurement. The objectives of this case study 4 are to be able to create a map of the Normalized Difference Snow Index, which is also referred to as NDSI. And we will be looking at a time period of 16 years. We will also be looking at a shorter time period of the NDSI values, which will look at a time period of 3 months, looking at data from the last December, January, and February. Lastly, we will create a time series for one of the predominant areas of snow accumulation on the Navajo Nation, which is the Chuska Mountains, where we will also there again be looking at the short time period of snowpack analysis, looking at the time period of last December, January, and February. There is an option for you to view this video alongside material that has been provided to you through the user guide that has been created for DSET, where each of the case studies are located. You have also the option to download the case study of interest to be able to follow along as we move step by step through this case study. There are a number of helpful tips that are also listed in this material that has been provided to you aside from this video. Those helpful tips include that if you are not on a Google Chrome server, it would be best if you switch to Google Chrome, as this is where DSET is optimized. It is also suggested that you work with a fast network to be able to help with the processing requests that you will be submitting through DSET. Also, note that when you're working with large data sets, it is helpful to be able to zoom to an area of interest as to limit the amount of calculation that will be needed to be done to perform your request. Case study 4 is broken down into two parts. The first part will specifically look and focus on the NDSI values for the Navajo Nation as a whole, and then also focusing on the Chuska Mountains. The second part of this case study will look at creating a time series for the variables NDSI and also the SWE, which is the snow water equivalent. So part 1, we will now start, which focuses on the NDSI snowpack analysis. For part 1, we will develop our short-term and long-term assessment for snowpack. So let's begin. Step 1 advises us to use the DSET website link. However, like you see here on the screen, if you have been working on a case study prior to case study 4, you will notice that we are not on the home screen of the DSET website. Therefore, we need to click here where you see my mouse moving on the right-hand side of the DSET interface and click reset. By clicking reset, we will be brought to the home page of DSET where all the parameters have been set to the default. So now that we've hit reset, we are able to start our analysis for this case study 4. Under step 2 for this case study, we have been instructed to change our layer to not look at each individual chapter boundary, but to look at the Navajo Nation as a whole. So here on the layers, we will remove the chapter boundaries and click on the Navajo Nation boundary option, which just outlines the Navajo Nation boundary. For this section of part 1, we are interested in looking at remote sensing data. So we will change our type to remote sensing. The data set that we are interested in is looking at the Sentinel-2, the top of atmosphere data set. And the variable that we are interested in is looking at the NDSI variable. So this is under the snow indice. So we'll scroll down and click on that variable. And for our processing requests identified here, we are interested in looking at the mean, so which is the default and what we will leave as is, and also the calculation as looking specifically at the values where we will leave as is as well. And you might notice all of these question marks here with the yellow circles behind it. These are included to be able to provide you information for these items here located on the Make Map panel to give you more information. We will now change our time period section. So this is step 8 of the case study 4. We are interested in looking at a custom date range. So there are a number of options here that you can look at, but we are interested in the custom date range. And we are interested in looking at a start date of 2004. So this is following step 8 of your case study right now in part 1 that we're working on. And we're interested in looking at January 1st. So we change these dates here. And we're interested, again, looking at January 1st here. So we'll switch that to January 1st. And so this creates our 16-year time period. Now we are able to click our Get Map layer, processing our requests. And again, if you should get an error here of either timeout or a server error, you can click reset like we did at the beginning of this tutorial and start with a fresh face of DSET to be able to run your analysis again. So now after our process request has gone through looking at the NDSI values from 2004 to 2020, we see that our values for our snow here, according to the NDSI, is very minimal. And so right now our transparency on DSET is put at 70. You can go ahead and move this bar to be able to see the intensified color scheme of values, better see the data. And so if we move this transparency bar to having no transparency, we're able to see our data for these NDSI values clear. And here we see that on the Navajo Nation, predominantly across the nation, there is very minimal amount of snow cover. However, in this region, which a large part is the Chuska Mountain, we see it's the area that has a predominant accumulation of snowfall. And so this is an area that we are interested in understanding more of the estimation of snow cover in this area. And so now as we move on, we will look at a shorter time period. And so what we've developed here is a 16-year time period, but now we want to see what snow looks like on a shorter time scale. And so we'll leave everything the same as is on our Make Map panel. However, what we are interested in now is changing our time period. But we are also interested in looking at not only the Navajo Nation boundaries, but looking at our Navajo Nation mountain ranges. So under our layered tab, where we're looking at our map layers, we're able to include our mountain ranges. So we'll do that now to focus in on this. We are now on step 14 of this case study, where we will change our time period to a pre-existing set time period, which is the last December, January, and February period. And so our start date and end date automatically updates according to our selection. So we will click on that now to get our map layer. So now what we see here is our NDSI values that have been created for a short-term period of 3 months. And we're able to see the snowfall across the snow cover estimation across the nation, as well as the intensified area of the Chuska Mountain. With this shorter time period, we will now create a time series to look at multiple variables of the area that has been most identified as creating a large estimation of snow cover, and this is the Chuska Mountain. So for part 2, we will use this make map information that we have developed, and we will leave this as is as we move forward in our case study to part 2. And in part 2, what we will now do is create our time series. And so we will leave this make map tab, move to our make graph tab, and we are now on step 20 of this case study, looking at our time series calculation. We will leave this as the native time series. And if you'd like more information about what native time series is, you can click this yellow circles with question marks to get more information about these variables, parameters along this make graph panel for any of these other sections as well where you have the same icon. So we're interested in the native time series. We are also interested in not looking at 1 but 2 variables, so we will switch that. For the region, you are given the option to really narrow down your area of interest. And so for this case study, we're interested in the Navajo Nation, but we're not interested in chapters. We are interested in the mountain ranges. So we will click to mountain ranges. And so you can see how this automatically zooms in for you to this area of where the mountain ranges are located. But we're not interested in all mountain ranges. We're interested in one particular one, which is the Chuska. And so once we click Chuska, we're brought in to this area that we are interested in focusing on. For variable 1 of our time series, we will leave as is. We won't change anything here. But for variable 2, this is where we will include another parameter that we haven't looked at yet. And this is the snow water equivalent. So to add this parameter for the snow water equivalent, we will leave this on the climate hydrology, but we will change our data set to SNODAS. And there our default for SNODAS is the snow water equivalent. We will leave everything else as is in this section. And now we're on step 26 of this case study that instructs us to change our time period. And so we're interested in the last December, January, February option to look at a short time scale. And now we are instructed to make sure that we have the same time period as for variable 2 and variable 1. So just double checking there, 12/2019 to February 2020. Again, we have 12/2019 to February 2020. So we've checked our time periods, and now we're ready to create our time series to compare these 2 variables. So here we see our variables on this figure. The blue represents the NDSI values, and the green represent the SWE values, the snow water equivalent values. So in general, we see that these 2 variables display similar patterns of snowpack development over the Chuska Mountains. So what you can see here just by looking at the data, you can also, as you see, moving your mouse over each of these points, there are specific data information that is presented to you. However, in looking at this figure, we see that early in December 2019, so in this region here, you can also click and hold your mouse area to be able to help you focus on a certain area that will zoom in to an area. So for example, we want to look at this area. You can use that to zoom in a little bit closer. So during this early December, we see that the NDSI values in this area were higher than the SWE values. This higher NDSI values at this time indicate that the snow cover area was higher and can be interpreted that this was when there was fresh snowfall in the area. However, as we see here, by mid-January, there was a crossover of the values for the SWE values and the NDSI values, where the SWE values increased to be more than the NDSI values, indicating that there was an accumulation of snowpack during the coldest portion of winter. What this data shows us here in this figure is that the progression of the snowfall and also the snowpack accumulation that occurs throughout the winter season. And then this shows us where the snow depth and density are also increasing after multiple winter storms that occurred throughout the Chuska Mountain during this last December, January, and February from 2019 to 2020 of this last winter season. And so with this figure, this brings us to the conclusion of our case study 4 example of understanding snowpack on the Navajo Nation by way of looking at the Chuska Mountain.